the Dangote Refinery's mega operations could soon shake up regional fuel markets could finally come to pass. Neighboring West African countries have begun moves to import refined petroleum products from the refinery. The chairman of the NPA, Ghana, who spoke at the OTL Africa Downstream Oil Conference in Lagos, said importing from Nigeria rather than Europe will reduce prices of other goods and services by removing freight costs. He explained that expensive exports from Europe, which costs the country about $400 million monthly, will be slashed. Other African countries have also started negotiations with the refinery. Tony, Dangote is set to shake up regional fuel markets in Africa. What are your thoughts on that one?
I'm happy for him because he's a businessman. He's a businessman. And Nigerians are only interested because they thought with the establishment and going into full operation, that things will change, buying petroleum and all that. But then since they went into operation, nothing has changed.
In West Africa today, something unusual is happening. For decades, countries in the region have lived with fuel shortages, soaring import bills, and dependence on foreign refineries. Crude oil was pumped out of African soil, shipped across oceans, refined elsewhere, and sold back to Africans at higher prices. That broken cycle is now being challenged in a serious way. At the center of this shift is Nigeria's Dangote Refinery. When it was first announced years ago, many doubted it would ever be completed. Others believed it would work far below its promised capacity. But in 2025, the story changed. The Dangote Refinery has now surpassed its initial production targets. Originally designed to process around 650,000 barrels of crude oil per day, reports and industry confirmations show that operational efficiency, technical upgrades, and steady supply chains have pushed its functional output beyond early expectations. This is not just a technical milestone, it is an economic statement. For Nigeria, it means fewer fuel imports, more local jobs, improved fuel availability, and stronger price stability. But the impact does not stop at Nigeria's borders. Across the border in Ghana, policymakers and industrial planners have been watching closely. Ghana has for years depended on fuel imports despite being an oil-producing nation itself. Although the country has refineries on record, most have struggled with undercapacity, shutdowns, and legacy infrastructure limitations. Now, Ghana is moving in a different direction. In 2025, Ghana formally advanced plans for a new refinery project estimated at around $10 billion in value. Unlike older facilities, this project is structured as a modern, large-scale refinery with the capacity to serve both domestic demand and regional exports. While construction timelines are still unfolding publicly, what is clear is that the project has moved from concept to action. Behind this push lies both economic pressure and opportunity. Ghana's government has faced rising fuel import bills, foreign exchange pressures, and public demand for more stable fuel prices. At the same time, the success of the Dangote Refinery has shown that large-scale refining in West Africa is no longer a dream. It is executable. Industry insiders describe the Ghana refinery project as a strategic response to what Nigeria has already started. Not as competition in hostility, but as competition in capability. West African countries, for the first time, are beginning to think of energy independence as something practical rather than aspirational. For Ghana, this refinery is not just about fuel. It is about economic control. Every barrel refined locally keeps more money within the economy. It strengthens the CDI by reducing dollar demand for imports. It builds technical jobs, logistics roles, maintenance careers, and long-term industrial expertise. Meanwhile, the ripple effect of Dangote's expanded output is already being felt. Countries that once depended on fuel shipped from Europe and Asia are now negotiating supply closer to home. Shipping times are shorter, costs are lower. Regional trade conversations have shifted. This shift is also political. Leaders across West Africa see domestic refining as a mark of serious economic planning. It reduces exposure to global fuel shocks, shipping bottlenecks, and geopolitical disruptions. When oil prices swing worldwide, countries with local refining capability are better shielded from the worst effects. In Ghana, public interest in the refinery project has grown rapidly. Discussions are happening on radio, social media, parliament floors, and economic forums. Citizens want to know how soon construction will start, where the refinery will be located, how many jobs it will create, and whether it will truly reduce fuel prices. There's also quiet pressure. Traders, transport unions, and manufacturing groups want predictability. Fuel instability affects transport costs, food prices, and factory production. A large-scale Ghanaian refinery could create a buffer for these sectors. While Nigeria's Dangote Refinery continues to expand output beyond early limits, Ghana's project stands as the next major chapter in West Africa's industrial energy story. One country has proven that massive local refining is possible. Another is now building the path to follow. But questions remain. Can Ghana complete the project on time? Will funding remain stable? Will political changes slow momentum? Will local expertise keep up with the technical demands of such a massive facility? These are the issues shaping the current moment. What is certain is this: West Africa's old model of exporting raw materials and importing finished products is being challenged. For the first time in many years, the region is writing a different energy story, and this story is only just beginning.
Ghana is looking to become West Africa's petroleum hub as part of broader efforts to reduce the importation of crude oil into the sub-region. This comes after the government broke ground for the construction of a new oil refinery. But energy analysts are concerned about the viability of this project as Ghana's oil exploration is in decline.
The refinery is expected to produce about 300,000 barrels of oil per day when completed. The first phase of the construction of the oil refinery is estimated to cost $12 billion. Investors from China and other private institutions will fund the project in collaboration with Ghana's government. The West African region consumes about 800,000 barrels of oil a day and imports most of it. The new refinery is aimed at making Ghana a hub for petroleum products to reduce the reliance on imports. But analysts are concerned about the dwindling oil production in Ghana, which they believe is likely to threaten the sustainability of the new oil refinery being constructed. The decline in Ghana's oil production is due to multiple factors, including the lack of proper maintenance of old exploration fields and equipment inefficiencies. Ghana produces more than 170,000 barrels of crude oil a day. Most of it is exported because the country lacks the capacity to refine all its oil.
The director, Local Content, Petroleum Commission Ghana, Kweku Boateng, spoke to Arise business correspondent Bosun Omofoye at the African Energy Week Summit in Cape Town about Ghana's petrochemical facility plans and Dangote Refinery project in Lagos and lots more. Let's take a listen.
Energy transition is real, given the climate activism that is happening in the oil and gas industry and the requirement for the oil companies and investors to comply with the ESG requirements guiding investments. Now what we are seeing here is that major equity funds are moving away from fossil fuel to alternative energy resources. And what we are going to see in the next few years is that there will be reduction in the new investment in exploration in oil and gas. And that will put pressure on African countries to attract new investment into oil and gas.
By 2025, the question in West Africa is no longer whether local refining is possible. The question is how fast each country can move before it is left behind. Nigeria has already answered that question through the Dangote Refinery. Its production has not only stabilized Nigeria's internal fuel market, it has changed how the entire region thinks about energy security. Countries that once sent oil overseas and waited weeks for refined fuel are now negotiating supply just across the border. For Ghana, this moment feels different from the past. Previous refinery efforts were slow, inconsistent, and often tied to outdated technology. Maintenance challenges, funding gaps, and political delays kept Ghana dependent on imports. This time, however, the stakes are much higher and the structure is different. the proposed $10 billion refinery is not just a facility. It is part of a larger industrial vision that includes petrochemicals, storage terminals, transport pipelines, export jetties, and power infrastructure. In simple terms, this is not a small upgrade, it is a full system. Sources close to the planning process describe it as Ghana's most ambitious industrial move in decades. The plan is to create a refinery that can meet Ghana's domestic fuel needs and serve neighboring countries such as Burkina Faso, Togo, Ivory Coast, and parts of Central Africa. This regional angle matters. West Africa's population is growing fast. Fuel demand is rising every year. Transport, manufacturing, mining, agriculture, and trade all depend on consistent energy supply. Whoever controls refinery capacity controls a major part of the regional economy. Nigeria has stepped into that role. Ghana now wants to follow. But following is not simple. The challenges are real. A project of this size needs heavy financing, strict technical discipline, stable governance, and long-term policy continuity. Any delays in land acquisition, contractor selection, environmental approvals, or funding disbursement could slow progress. There is also the issue of skills. Large-scale refineries need highly trained engineers, safety experts, pipeline specialists, chemical technicians, and digital control operators. Ghana has strong technical talent, but the country must scale training programs quickly to meet the demands of a modern mega-refinery. Another key factor is trust. Investors want assurance that rules will not change halfway through the project. Citizens want assurance that public funds will be protected. Local communities want assurance that environmental and health risks will be managed responsibly. The refinery must be built not only with steel and concrete, but with public confidence. Meanwhile, Dangote's refinery continues to operate at high levels, testing the regional market. Its expanded capacity has already begun influencing pricing behavior. Fuel sellers in neighboring countries now calculate their import options differently. European and Asian suppliers who once dominated African fuel markets are facing a new reality. This is a quiet shift of power. Energy independence has long been talked about in Africa. Now it is being built. Ghana's refinery project represents more than fuel. It represents control. Control over supply. Control over pricing buffers. Control over industrial growth pace. If it succeeds, Ghana could become a regional fuel hub in the next decade, complementing Nigeria's dominance rather than competing destructively. The idea is not to push out neighbors, but to strengthen regional resilience. One country cannot serve everyone alone. Multiple refining centers create stability. They reduce congestion at ports. They reduce vulnerability to global shipping crises. They improve regional energy diplomacy. But time matters. If Ghana delays too long, Nigeria's refinery could capture too much of the regional market. If Ghana moves efficiently, the two could build an energy corridor across West Africa. That could be transformative. Across Ghana today, this topic is no longer discussed only by economists. It is now part of everyday conversations. Drivers talk about fuel price stability. Factory owners talk about production cost forecasting. Students talk about future engineering careers. Traders talk about transport predictability. This is what real infrastructure does. It changes conversations. It changes expectations. Dangote has shown what is possible. Ghana is now stepping into that same arena. The difference between history and headlines will be execution. West Africa has been told for decades that it cannot refine its own energy at scale. That narrative is collapsing. The future of energy on the continent is no longer a foreign story. It is being written locally. And now the real question is not whether Ghana can follow. It is whether Ghana will finish strong. Now tell us what you think. Do you believe Ghana's $10 billion refinery can match or even rival the Dangote Refinery? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you found this report valuable, support the work by liking the video and subscribing to the channel so you can stay updated on major African developments.